each individual carries within them a unique consciousness, but unraveling this requires profound reflection. Suddenly we realize that discovering our true selves is an exceedingly challenging task. What remains unconscious within us manifests in our lives as an unavoidable fate. There is no consciousness without pain. Humans will go to great lengths, no matter how absurd, to evade confronting their own souls. Enlightenment doesn't come from envisioning radiant figures, but by illuminating the darkness within. Dreams serve as hidden gateways within the deepest and most secretive realms of the soul, leading to a cosmic night that has existed in the psyche long before the advent of ego consciousness and will persist regardless of how expansive our individual consciousness becomes. An inflated consciousness is inherently self-centered, oblivious to the past, blind to contemporary events, and incapable of drawing accurate conclusions about the future. It becomes ensnared by its own allure, inevitably inviting calamities that lead to its demise. No one can claim immunity from the zeitgeist of their era or a complete understanding of it. Despite our conscious convictions, each of us, as a particle of the collective mass, is in some way influenced, colored, or even undermined by the prevailing spirit. Freedom is constrained by the limits of our consciousness. When faced with challenges, we instinctively recoil from traversing paths veiled in obscurity and darkness. We crave unequivocal outcomes, forgetting that true results emerge only after delving into and emerging from darkness. Yet, to penetrate this darkness, we must harness the full power of enlightenment that consciousness can offer. Let us continue exploring this video to uncover further meaningful excerpts about consciousness from Carl Jung. If, during our viewing, you notice any profound quotes not mentioned here, please share your thoughts by leaving a comment below the video. Together, we can delve deeper into the profound meanings these quotes convey about human consciousness and the soul. Let's continue to explore and disseminate knowledge about consciousness and the psyche. An inflated consciousness is always egocentric and conscious of nothing but its own existence. It is incapable of learning from the past, incapable of understanding contemporary events, and incapable of drawing right conclusions about the future. It is hypnotized by itself and therefore cannot be argued with. It inevitably dooms itself to calamities that must strike it dead. What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. It is, on the whole, probably, that we continually dream, but that consciousness makes such a noise that we do not hear it. The mind has grown to its present state of consciousness, as an acorn grows into an oak, or as saurians developed into mammals. When we must deal with problems, we instinctively resist trying the way that leads through obscurity and darkness. We wish to hear only of unequivocal results, and completely forget that these results can only be brought about when we have ventured into and emerged again from the darkness. But to penetrate the darkness, we must summon all the powers of enlightenment that consciousness can offer. No one can flatter himself that he is immune to the spirit of his own epoch, or even that he possesses a full understanding of it. Irrespective of our conscious convictions, each one of us, without exception, being a particle of the general mass, is somewhere attached to, colored by, or even undermined by, the spirit which goes through the mass. Freedom stretches only as far as the limits of our consciousness. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Man is the microcosm of the macrocosm. The God on earth is built on the pattern of the God in nature, but the universal consciousness of the real ego transcends a millionfold the self-consciousness of the personal for false ego. The difference between the natural individuation process, which runs its course unconsciously, and the one that is consciously realized is tremendous. In the first case, consciousness nowhere intervenes. The end remains as dark as the beginning. In the second case, so much darkness comes to light that the personality is permeated with light, and consciousness necessarily gains in scope and insight. The encounter between conscious and unconscious has to ensure that the light that shines in the darkness is not only comprehended by the darkness, but comprehends it. Dreams are impartial, spontaneous products of the unconscious psyche, outside the control of the will. They are pure nature. They show us the unvarnished, natural truth, and are therefore fitted, as nothing else is, to give us back an attitude that accords with our basic human nature when our consciousness has strayed too far from its foundations and run into an impasse. The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul, opening into that cosmic night which was psyche long before there was any ego consciousness, and which will remain psyche no matter how far our ego consciousness extends. To find out what is truly individual in ourselves, profound reflection is needed, and suddenly we realize how uncommonly difficult the discovery of individuality is. The curve of life is like the parabola of a projectile, which, disturbed from its initial state of rest, rises and then returns to a state of repose. Like a projectile flying to its goal, life ends in death. Even its ascent and its zenith are only steps and means to this goal. For enlightenment or no enlightenment, consciousness or no consciousness, nature prepares itself for death. That which you do not bring to consciousness comes to you as your fate. That which you do bring to consciousness, whether it was what you thought you wanted or not, is your destiny. The Western God image is a representation of the collective unconscious, an archetype of the psyche that undergoes a continual process of transformation. The God image evolves through its relationship to humanity. Whoever knows God has an effect on him. For the individual, knowing God is the process of recognizing and assimilating the pressured and paradoxical contents of the self, which come to consciousness, seek incarnation within the ego. The darkness which clings to every personality is the door into the unconscious and the gateway of dreams, from which those two twilight figures, the shadow and the anima, step into our nightly visions or, remaining invisible, take possession of our ego consciousness. The greatest and most important problems of life are all in a certain sense insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. This outgrowing, as I formerly called it, on further experience was seen to consist in a new level of consciousness. Some higher or wider interest arose on the person's horizon, and through this widening of view, the insoluble problem lost its urgency. It was not solved logically in its own terms, but faded out when confronted with a new and stronger life tendency. The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. Conflict exists strictly as an opportunity to raise our consciousness. Freedom stretches only as far as the limits of our consciousness. In studying the history of the human mind, one is impressed again and again by the fact that its growth keeps pace with a widening range of consciousness, and that each step forward is an extremely painful and laborious achievement. One could almost say that nothing is more hateful to man than to give up the smallest particle of unconsciousness. He has a profound fear of the unknown. Ask anybody who has ever tried to introduce new ideas. In the history of the collective, as in the history of the individual, everything depends on the development of consciousness. Through these profound quotes about consciousness by Carl Jung, we realize that the journey of self-discovery never ends. Consciousness is an endless journey, opening before us the doors of understanding and self-awareness. Let these quotes be a source of inspiration and guidance for us in our daily lives, so that we may continue to move forward with courage and focus, constantly exploring the invisible treasures within our souls. Remember, consciousness is not just about understanding ourselves, but also about understanding the world around us, about the relationship between humans and the universe. Let's continue to devote time to study, reflect, and understand, because only through this can we progress further on the path to becoming the best version of ourselves. And finally, always remember that understanding is never perfect, and progress in consciousness is a journey that never ends. If you find this content helpful and valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to receive more useful information. Thank you for following along.